Hey everyone, welcome to another Ninja RMM MSP live chat. I am Jonathan Crow. I'm Director of Content Community here at Ninja RMM. I've got with me all sorts of beautiful folks. So I've got Tom Watson. He's our Channel Chief Advisor. Hey Tom, how's it going?
Great.
And we've got Alex and Marnie from LifeCycle Insights. And I want to bring up their site a little bit. Hey guys, how you doing?
Good. How are you?
Pretty good, you guys. Of course, we recognize Alex, but Marnie, this is your first time on a live chat, so good to have you here.
It is. Last time you and I chatted live was on the Tech Bar.
That's right, which is a little bit of a different show for sure.
A little bit of a different show, yes.
Yeah, but LifeCycle Insights, we usually save this up to the end. I just want to give you guys a quick moment, just quick shout out, explain what you guys are helping people accomplish.
Alex and I
Sure. I'll take that. No, that's fine. So we've built a platform around the account management VCIO process, essentially to take data that you already have in your disparate systems in your MSP and deliver it in ways that are really proactive to your customer and give you the ability to analyze the data, make it presentable to C-level executives, and kind of take out the nerd jargon. So really, it's a sales presentation tool that really assists account managers and VCIOs in doing their job.
Nice. All right. And I have included, you guys are very active in the community. You share a ton of stuff. I've got this agenda doc here for anyone who's new to the live chats. A couple of things I'll say right off the bat. First of all, this is being recorded. So you will get a recording of it if you have to jump. In fact, if you just wait a little while, you can go back to this link in about a minute after the session's over. Recording will be right here for you, waiting for you. But we also typically share a doc, and this is something that I've asked our friends here to share some resources. Tom and I have put some things together. I'm going to drop it here in the chat, and you guys can skip ahead, but there's a lot of things that you can come back. You can see our agenda, see how well we stick to that, but you'll also see a bunch of resources and tools and things like that. So check out that doc. I also want to take a moment here to thank everybody for being active in the chat. We definitely want to make this as interactive as possible, so talk to us. We'll be talking back the whole time. It's great to see people calling in from Montreal, from Texas, from NYC. It's also good. Chris points out, I think the last time we talked was a couple weeks ago, and GameStop was happening then. It's happening again. We're going to the moon. But now I want to turn it over to Mark. So Mark Lamb is Technical Director at M3 Networks. And Mark, I'll pull up your site too. But thank you so much for joining us. You're an MSP owner. Why don't you tell everybody about yourself?
Yeah, sure. So thanks, Jonathan. Yeah, I'm the technical director here at M3. So we're a full stack managed IT and cybersecurity provider based in Scotland, but we operate throughout the UK. Started in 2009 after the last major crisis, the financial crisis, and we've just been growing ever since, really. Got a lot of clients in the automotive sector, construction, manufacturing, hospitality, and technology fields. So a lot of these companies that operate in these sectors are heavily reliant on IT, right? So they're good markets for us to operate in.
Yeah, absolutely. And Mark, just for more context, I think you reached out to me a while ago, and it was specifically around security. I know that's a big focus of you guys, and you've actually developed a tool that's pretty cool. And I'm going to save some time at the end if you want to show that off a little bit, because it's really pretty interesting.
Yeah. So as you say, Jonathan, when I reached out to you, it was about our focus on security. After a few months ago, when you had the MSP live chat around about security, there's a lot of great content there, and so I think to get a bit more detail on that, we decided several years ago that we were going to pivot the business a bit more into the cyber area. It was quite clear that a lot of organizations were becoming the main focus of bad actors targeting smaller organizations that aren't defending themselves well. And a lot of people in IT, a lot of IT organizations, they try and approach cyber just thinking that it's an extension of IT, right? As if it's just about antivirus, about email filtering, and it's much, much more than that. And the more we got involved in that, and the more that we investigated and dug deeper, we started to realize and uncovered a whole other world of IT and cybersecurity. So yeah, we've got a really comprehensive stack, as you call it. But on top of that, trying to solve the even bigger challenge, which is getting organizations to invest in their cybersecurity.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you and I connected, you told me you guys specialize in incident response. You guys do a ton in security. This time for another conversation. We'll have to have you back on to talk all about that, because there's a lot to cover there that I think a lot of people would be interested in. But for today, I did want to highlight. Okay, again, we're talking about driving retention, referrals, customer satisfaction, how important it is, and a couple of things. First, I put a parental advisory here for you, Mark. You've already given your intro, and there's no F-bombs yet, so I'm pretty impressed with that. But I do have a sensor beeper that I can use. So I wanted to give people a little shout there. Mark is Scottish, and he's informed me that swearing does kind of come with the territory there. But then check this out. So this is the other reason why talk with Mark, we decided, okay, yes, you could absolutely talk to security, but let's talk about customer satisfaction, because look at this. Now, when you and I were talking, you were saying 99% CSAT score. Then I go on your website, I scroll down, and I see this. You guys are at 100. So, yeah. I mean, so you guys are obviously doing something right. And this is based off, it says 418 reviews in the last 90 days. So this isn't just like 2 reviews or something. So that is a big thing that we wanted to bring you in to talk about, how you guys are actually achieving this, how you've maintained it. And I want to draw people's attention to polls down here before we launch into that. So we launched some polls. We want to know, people on the line here, are you guys actively collecting customer feedback? If so, how are you doing it? We've also got some other polls too that are that the folks here have suggested. And we can get into those a little bit later on. But this first one, if we look at it, so how many people out there are collecting customer feedback? We got the majority of folks, at least who have responded to the poll so far, saying we're not doing that yet. So I think that's one thing that we can cover, Mark. We've got tools in the doc that will suggest how to do that. It looks like you guys are using Smileback. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, and so we can get into that a little bit later on. But why don't we back up a little bit and talk about customer satisfaction, why this is an important topic for everybody. And Alex and Marnie, you guys can feel free, and Tom too, to chime in too. But talking with you, Mark, I mean, you've got the big score. And one thing that jumped out with me was in our previous conversation, you mentioned, okay, it's one thing to get up to 90, to 95. I think I did some research and I saw that an industry average is somewhere between 75 and 80, actually. But you get up to 90, even 95. It's getting that last mile, those last 5 points where you're getting up past 95. You were mentioning that actually takes as much work as getting up to 90 to begin with. So tell us a little bit about kind of how you guys have gotten there.
Yeah, well, I'll just get it over and done with right away instead of waiting. You said, why have we got 100% just now?
Yeah.
Why didn't I tell you? Because someone's going to fuck it up, right? So I want to make sure that
I wasn't ready for my censor button.
Maybe on the recording.
Yeah, there you go.
But the reality is, I'm not going to say it's impossible, but someone always messes up. It'll always come down. It will always fluctuate. In terms of getting there, it's difficult, right? I mean, it's difficult to get to industry average. It's even harder to get to that 95%, like you say. But to really turn the screw to go from 95 to anything beyond that is just exceptionally difficult. You have to fundamentally change things, right? And you have to you want to get really deep into who are the people that are servicing the clients and how are you looking after those people? How are you helping them, enable them to deliver that service, right? Everything has to change. Everything, you have to be, in some ways, customer service focused first, then technically focused later, right? Dealing with the problem, like Marnie and I were talking before the call started, about getting on the side of the customer, right? A bit of psychology there, reverse psychology, but actually, you've got to understand people. That's a big part of it too. You've got to be a not necessarily a people pleaser. I wouldn't mistaken it for that, but you've got to be a people person. You've got to be able to, you've got to have emotional intelligence, you've got to build rapport, you've got to have sympathy, you've got to care, you've got to be dynamic. In emotional intelligence, right, you've got to adjust your approach to their energy and the way that they're behaving, right? If you're up here and they're down there, there's a disconnect. You've got to get on level with them. There's a lot that goes into it.
Well, I want to stir the pot a little bit here. Let's just propose that there's some people who may be on the line, and maybe some of us here on the panel, who are none of those things. So then where do we go from there? I mean, obviously there's a question of, well, okay, what are you doing as a business owner who's providing support? But I know a big part of your recipe for success that you guys focused on was hiring and establishing the culture, right? And just kind of curious with Alex and Marnie too, and Alex being a former owner, and then obviously now working with MSP clients, how you've seen people kind of decide to make this a core focus. Mark, for you, what was it? Did you guys launch with knowing that, okay, yes, this needs to be our core differentiator, this is a big focus, or was there a problem you guys had to react?
I think it's always been part of our core values in terms of what we are as an organization and who we are as people. I think I suppose, to be fair to everybody else that's trying to achieve the same thing, can they achieve it? Are they that way inclined? And if they're not, then they need to be thinking about how they can do that, right? And we naturally were like that, and it kind of emanated from us. And because we are people, and when we hire people, we were doing the same, right? Subconsciously, perhaps, I'm not sure it was conscious to begin with, but subconsciously we were looking for people that matched that value and that were like us. And then grew it from there, really. We became much more aware of it when it started to dip. We went through a process about 3 or 4 years ago where our core team, and I think this happens to every organization, you start off as you grow your MSP or you grow any business, you have that core band, that core team. But as the business starts to grow and develop, people outgrow the company and those people move on. And at that juncture, for us, it became extremely apparent that we had to find a way to systemize this, because you can't always rely on the people. It's good when you can, but you can't always do that. And that's when we got much more focused on bringing it into recruitment, bringing it into management, bringing it into operations, bringing it into processes and procedures, bringing it into everything. It has to be a central thread that runs through everything that you do. And it has to be the place that everything comes from. That's really,
yeah. I mean, that's interesting that you picked that point of, okay, you had your core founding team. Now you're starting to hire external people, and you have to kind of impart everything, that culture, onto them. And you're realizing we got to actually have some processes and documentation around this. Alex, you were saying before we went live here, I think we were talking about this poll question we had: do you prefer people or computers? And you said people are behind computers, puppies, all the way back behind porcupines, somewhere like that. So how did you approach this with that?
Well, look, I kid, except I don't, because we all like the customers who are like us, the customers who we see eye to eye with, the customers who we see as our good customers. We all also have those challenging customers who we dread picking up the phone to talk to. And to Mark's point, if it's in your culture, if it's in your company culture, and it's really your company culture, not just something that you decided to write on the front page of a business plan about your company culture, if it's really there, then everybody on the team is willing to say, hey, this isn't my favorite human being, but I'm going to pick up the phone and talk to him because we have to address this issue. So number one, you don't always get it right the first try. People will make mistakes. You get to 100, like Mark said, somebody will screw it up. Mark had a Scottish adjective for that, but somebody will screw it up and they'll not knock it backwards, right? You will make mistakes even when everybody's in their stride and everything's going right. Customer success is not about not making mistakes. It's about what you do once you make a mistake to go make it right. To err is human. To really screw it up takes a computer, but a technician is second right behind that computer. They will screw up. We will make mistakes along the way. Your salespeople will stick their foot in their mouth. At some point, your customer has to know, number one, you're willing to eat crow and go back and say, we dropped the ball. And number two, you're willing to do what it takes to make it right. And I think that has to be that has to be core value.
I think that aligns with something that Mark said earlier in terms of you don't have to be a people pleaser because that's not customer success, right? Some people think the customer is always right, and that is in fact not true, but the customer always deserves to have the right things done for them, right? So it's not about having to do what they want, it's having to do what's right. And I think that's an important piece of that when you're hiring into that culture, the mentality of that the customer is always right is very different from let's do what's right for the customer.
Did you guys find yourselves, Tom, I'm going to pick on you for a second. Did you find yourself pulled into a lot of damage control, especially maybe early on? Or were you adamant about basically enabling techs to solve their own problems to begin with? Like, how often were you getting pulled in to do damage control?
Are you speaking of damage control in terms of customer service, complaints?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I usually wanted the techs to kind of stay out of that, wanted that to come kind of to my level and deal with that one-on-one with the client. I kind of wanted to shield my technicians from those kind of things. Even if they were involved, I wanted to be more of a discussion at a business level.
And so how often, I mean, did you get to a point where that was no longer scalable? Were you trying to kind of find another solution for that? Or were you always kind of the person who would come in and resolve things?
Well, actually I made the decision it was about 6 years before I sold that I needed to start putting things in place. So I wasn't that person. So I was focusing on sales and maybe big projects, that kind of thing. And I put in an account manager. I actually moved someone over who was administrative and something of a dispatcher, moved them over to an account management role because they're actually better at that, and put them as kind of a buffer in there to handle all of those kind of things. And then also at the same time, upsell to clients on hardware and handle a number of things that were kind of outside the realm of sales and outside the realm of dispatcher and that I didn't want to handle.
Gotcha. And this let's jump into the role discussion then, because if we back up and look at customer satisfaction, I think we talked about one way to, what does that mean? What's one way to measure it? And we can go deeper into that in just a minute. But before we get there, looking at roles, Mark, I'm just curious. We had this asked in one of the polls. We asked the audience, do you guys have dedicated customer success managers? You might not call them that exactly. Do you have account managers, or you're at the level where you're the owner, you're doing a bit of everything, so you're wearing that hat? What's your team look like right now, Mark?
So we've got a dedicated, we call it account manager, but I think to use the more widely accepted American term now, the customer success manager, because as Marnie was saying at the before our call, we don't manage the account, we manage the customer, and not only do we manage the customer, we try to get them to be successful, right? So one of the big things that's part of that for us is making sure that when our account manager or customer success manager speaks with the customer, they need to get the feeling and the understanding that they have a foot in both camps, right? So I'm kind of in the customer's camp, but I'm in, because the customer can't possibly believe that you're 100% in theirs, right? That's just unrealistic, and they
know who writes your paycheck.
Yeah, exactly. So making sure that they know that they're in both and that they're going to do something about it and they're going to address it is really important. So our customer success program, call it that, the way that we approach customer success and the way we look after customers is comprehensive. It's not just about the CSAT, although CSAT is important, and following up with the positives, with the negatives, so the customers know that these things have been addressed and that they're basically, they know that they're not going to say bye to you at one QBR and see you 3 months later, right? Or 6 or 9 months if they cancel that meeting, and that's when things start to drift. It's about the small moments. It's the day-to-day. It's the email communication. It's the phone calls. It's following up on feedback. It's engaging with them on social channels as well, and knowing that you're there, feeling that you're present, right, and being involved with them, and it makes everything else easier when it comes to dealing with negative or neutral feedback, when it comes to quotes for additional work, when it comes to scoping projects, when it comes to referrals, even when it comes to finance and the bill's not getting paid. You pick up the phone and say, "Come on, guys, get this paid," right? everything gets easier if you're managing the customer and you've got that relationship with them.
And so this makes me think of something that came up with the conversation that you and Tom and I had last week. And we were talking about roles, account managers, and you were basically saying, okay, advice for maybe some smaller MSPs who are looking to hire on some new roles this year. Some people are looking at salespeople, and you kind of had something controversial to say there. And you're basically saying, no, forget that. Account manager is a way more impactful position in a lot of cases.
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's no secret that it's easier to get business out of clients than it is to go and win a new one, right? I'm sure I've seen a statistic. It costs 7 times more to win a new client than it costs to get business out of a current one. So, and not only that, new salespeople, and I know obviously in the UK it's different here, but in the US market they're exceptionally expensive. Now, it doesn't make sense to pursue the strategy of a cold salesperson coming in, getting ramped up, all the marketing work that has to go behind that. They try and win new business when you're leaving so much money on the table with existing clients who, by the way, if you keep them happy, not only are you protecting the revenue you have now, but there's so much more revenue there to be had. So, absolutely.
And they'll help you build a referral business. I mean,
yeah. Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with that more. You know, if you're under $1 million today, hire an account manager before a salesperson. That's the advice I would give you. At $2 million, you can afford to have both. But you know, if you're small and you're trying to figure out which one of those positions to hire, customer success, an account manager, someone in one of those type roles, guess what? They understand your business well enough that they can go sit down and talk to the 1 or 2 or 3 prospects you have a month that come through. But they can also spend 95% of their time making sure that the money that you already have coming in, that keeps everybody paid, that keeps everything moving well, and they can keep those customers happy, and they can grow that business 25, 30, 35%. We're seeing numbers upwards of 35% on a regular basis with folks who dive into QBRs head on and really use that as a customer experience tool. So a huge believer in what you're saying there, Mark.
But additional to what you said there, Alex, I think that if you look at referrals, like you said, referrals, and that's so important because if referral is the best form of being able to get new business. If someone phones up and says, hey, who do you use for this? Who do you use for that? You should speak to these guys. Those sales are quicker and faster. A new cold salesperson isn't going to open an account as fast as that, right? They're going to have a whole sales cycle. And in IT, the sales cycle's often long because either the customer's got a contract or they're worried about changing and they don't want to. They don't want the hassle. And I'll refrain from swearing again, but you know, we always say that the customers and people, they get charged for stuff they don't know about, right? How many customers could look at an invoice that you send them and understand what they've just bought? It's a problem, right? And when customers come to change, they're struck with fear. Unless they're really bold, they typically don't want to do that. I guess what it comes down to is they want you to look after them. They just want to be taken care of. Who doesn't want to be looked after?
I certainly do.
To that point, I quote Paul Green all the time because he says very eloquently and better than I could do a good job of it that the big issue that MSPs have is we're selling a service that's so complex that customers need us to help them understand it, but they're trying to buy it before they understand it. So here we are trying to sell them a product that they can't even comprehend why they're going to sign with us. So why are they signing? Because they like the person, because they think that person will look out for them, because relationships and humans. So, and to Sean's point, I totally get what he's saying that look at your business and see whether account management or sales matters. But if you don't have an account management process, accounts will fall through the cracks, things will get lost, you will lose customers. An account manager can go out and help you close a new deal if it comes through the door, and they absolutely should be a referral and lead generation tool. Every time we go have a QBR, we would end it with a couple of questions. Did we deliver value to you today in this meeting? And who do you know who might see some value in the same kind of services? And would you be willing to make an introduction? Right? That's an uncomfortable question to ask, but you know what? If you look uncomfortable asking it, your customer will actually empathize for you and introduce you to somebody. They'll feel bad for you and introduce you to somebody.
Probably find that they want to. Alex. Like you say, you probably don't even have to ask. They're already thinking about who they can introduce you to.
Yep.
I mean, if you're doing right. But so Marty, this is a good chance for you to hop in with this too, because we got some great questions. Sean, and then also, let's see who was asking this. Derek. Let's talk a little bit more about the role. So we're advocating for account managers and for maybe some smaller shops where they're trying to kind of figure out, what is my headcount going to look like for the next year? What's this role actually look like? What does the day-to-day role? I mean, Alex, you bring up QBRs, and that's a kind of natural thing that people think about. But what are the other touch points that are happening? I mean, Mark, you were kind of suggesting that they're happening constantly. So I guess what does an account manager's day or a customer success manager's day look like?
So if I can first go up to what attributes should a customer success manager have? I think they really need to understand the pain point from the client perspective, and they need to be able to problem solve. So what the customer need, or clients, I saw that conversation too, needs to believe is that you understand where they are and what success looks like for them. So, somebody that can then problem solve to help them get there. So when I looked so I had a team that started as 3 customer success managers, grew to 17. And what I really wanted them to be able to do is understand the business that their client was in and what we could do to help solve those problems. So it's just like we discuss in business reviews, where you're trying to identify client pain points. How is what we bring to the table going to solve that for them, and how can we help bridge the gap? So I think first, communication is key. Problem solving is mission critical, and really the ability to understand where they are and to want to help them. Again, not be the pleaser person where they're already right, but to be honest with them and and transparent with them to solve a problem.
Yeah, absolutely. And Brian brings to the point too. I mean, depends on volume of clients too. This kind of goes back to Sean's larger point of looking at your business and looking at the need. Where is the gap? And if you as an owner, if you have fewer clients and you're able to kind of service this role, this goes back to a point that Mark was bringing up when we were talking earlier. Someone is performing this function, and it may be you, the owner, but what then is doing that job holding you back from? I guess that's a question.
And I think the other important thing to point out there is, just because you have 2 hats doesn't mean you don't have 2 very defined processes for 2 different roles, right? In a small business, people wear multiple hats, but the account manager, that customer success person, still needs to be in ConnectWise. We called it 2-step close, but reviewing all the tickets before they get closed and going through that process, communicating with the customer to make sure their business needs are met, doing those things. The salesperson still needs to be outside generating new revenue and doing closing the new deal. If you have to wear both of those hats, that's great, but each of those should have a different process.
Yeah, Tom, going back to your days, you've been active in the chat here, can respond to these things too. Anything you want to add to that in terms of kind of how you handle things with roles when you were an owner?
No, my big focus, I kind of pointed out in the chat, was that I had salespeople, but what I found happening was that salesperson, after they had closed the deal, managed service agreement, I kind of like to separate them out from the account management, which I originally had them doing. But the problem is I've got someone dealing with an existing client and trying to hunt at the same time. And those 2 things didn't seem to work out that well. So I wanted to separate that. But I wanted someone who was a specialist to be able to focus in on the ongoing needs of that client. For a very basic example, that would be like sales of new computers and hardware. I wanted them to be able to upsell them, to understand the options, to give those options to the client, so the client felt like they had some choice in it, and they had someone they could call when they need new machines. And what I found was we refreshed a lot of machines a lot faster once the clients knew they had someone they could talk to about those machines, what they were experiencing, and maybe what they wanted out of another machine. And so it dramatically increased sales. So I found that you could basically, in my situation, could pay someone basically a $50,000 a year salary and then some good commission on hardware sales, and have them in an account management role, and have that person also deal with kind of that first line of customer support issues. They had a very close relationship tied to the clients, knew everyone by name, and people had a feeling they could call that person up. And it also allowed me, the big part of it was I just didn't feel like, I was also nearing that point that MSP owners do, where I was burned out, didn't want to deal with people one-on-one like that on a daily basis, wanted to deal with net new only. So it satisfied those roles at my MSP.
How big was your MSP by the time you were able to separate those roles? I think that's what a lot of these folks are struggling with, because there's a lot of 3 and 4 man MSPs out there. There's a lot that are smaller than that. At what point do you think an MSP can realistically separate those roles out?
Right, Alex, you kind of already touched on that too. I was right around $1 million at the point where I had a salesperson plus an account manager, and I think that goes in line with what you were saying earlier.
Yeah, that's about where we were too.
Yeah, Mark. I mean, how about you guys with your evolution as you were growing? You started off, you knew that customer support, customer satisfaction was going to be a big focus for you guys. And it's something that actually I pointed out when we were first talking about this topic. Like, everybody says that customer support, that they're the best. This is like the thing they care about most. But clearly, you guys, I mean, your CSAT score and also some of the other things you're doing, you are making a differentiator by following through on with actions. So, but curious, as you're building, I mean, what did the evolution look like? Was there a similar stage where you were able to start bringing on new people to specialize?
Yeah. For us, it was a case of being too successful at what you do, right? Because it was cultural, because it was ingrained in who we were, because we were looking after clients, we were seeing steady 25% year-on-year growth all the time, and you can't sustain that. Well, you can, but you have to change. It was becoming apparent that as on 1 year, as we were, so obviously not dollars, but I'm trying to calculate that back to me. It probably wasn't far from $1 million US. Probably maybe, I don't know, maybe 750, something like that, 750,000 US. We realized that we couldn't continue to keep customers happy, and we're starting to realize that when we're speaking to customers, you're kind of like, we've all done it, right? You're just paying them lip service. You're thinking, yeah, I hear what you're saying. I'm going to get to that later. And the next week comes by, and you're getting that chaser email saying, "Have you done that yet? Is what's happening?" And I just had a thought one day where I was thinking, we can't do this. We're going to let people down. Because it was so cultural, we're like, we have to address it. So believe it or not, the reason that we brought the account manager in place wasn't because of what we're talking about today. We did it because we had to maintain the customer satisfaction. But it was very evident after maybe only 3 to 6 months into the process, it was the best thing we ever did. Right? It was like as a big accelerator button. Sales were just coming in like you couldn't believe, which accelerated the next stage of growth. I guess the point I would make is that if you don't do it, you're just going to stay where you are. And if there's one thing that it's worth taking a pay cut in your business for, it's to find the money to hire an account manager, because it will make everything else easier after that. Because it's going to directly impact sales. If you do it right. If you do it wrong, that would be different. But if you do it right.
Well, yeah, I mean, doing it wrong and right, that Derek is asking more questions. He had a great question about what qualities are you looking for. He asked in the chat, does this person need IT experience? Probably different for everybody, right? But we got an emphatic no from Alex here.
Well, I was lucky enough at my MSP to hire the director of customer success, who was laid off from a $30 million a year MSP. We stretched the budget 100 ways to Sunday to bring in the right person, and she was non-technical, but it was the best thing we ever did, because she never talked over a customer, never talked past a customer, never talked about flux capacitors and gigabytes. She didn't know any of it. So she would come lean on our engineering team for that. She'd come lean on the help desk when things got really technical, but she understood customer emotion and how to read the customer. She understood what fixing a problem meant. And when she promised a customer something, she was on it until it was fixed. And that goes a long, long way.
I think that's an advantage, actually, Alex. I think it puts you in a stronger place, because if you don't know, you don't know. Yeah. So you're better not to know, because then all you can focus on is the customer side, right? Because ultimately that's all that matters. Let someone else, as you get bigger, that person would become something like a service coordinator, a service manager that's going to handle that communication and really relay that back, maybe in layman's terms, to the account manager. You don't need to be getting, because let's be honest, if you can explain it, you probably will, and that's not going to help the situation. You might as well do it yourself.
Let's shift a little bit to basically measurement. So there, maybe this question has two parts. There's kind of what you do before you have someone in this role, and then there's maybe what you do after it. And maybe the answer is the same for both. But Mark, you mentioned you kind of got the feeling that we're starting to let folks down. We're not being as responsive as we were. Were you also seeing that in hard numbers? Were you looking at things? Were you using CSAT then? Were there other things you were looking at?
I think, yeah, I mean, it was a combination of, as they call it, muscle and feel, as well as stats, right? Yeah, and when you're in the benefit, of being a smaller MSP, is that you instinctively know something's not right, and you've got to go and figure it out. You've got to go and ask why. If the data supports the feeling, and you can, what you hypothesize to be the case, you put it to the test and realize it's true, then you need to do something about it. And for us, it was a case of feeling it first. And then, what it's like is you start to become aware of something, it appears everywhere, right? Yeah. That's the problem. When someone unveils the problem and you're like, oh my goodness, I'm seeing it everywhere now. And then you just can't ignore it anymore.
And then, did you have, sorry. I was just saying, you had specific metrics. So when I've worked for software platforms, we've tracked adoption, right, usage within the platform. But I've also tracked things like new leadership, right, because that could cause a customer health problem in terms of churn. Are they attending meetings? Silence is deadly often, right? If they're not communicating back, that was always a potential for churn. Did you look at that as trying to predict churn, or were you strictly from the success, and what metrics were there, were there numbers, be they qualitative or quantitative, that you were really looking at for those?
Well, to the point, Marnie, you had about leadership change, that's a really important one, because with us, we've got, for account management, we've got call it a golden rule, if you will. If we become aware that, and you're in a great place to find it out, right? Because you're the IT company, you're going to find out that's happening because they're needing a new user or a new computer. Yep. If you recognize a leadership change in a company and you're one of your clients, especially if they're a major client, you better be all over them, because what's that in the leadership role going to do? They're going to want to bring the people with them that they like and that they work with. So you're in a very dangerous place when that happens, and you want to be on top of that as fast as you can.
It's funny. I think you open up to two things there. Number one, you have an issue with your current client that requires customer success to step in. Number two, you probably have a sales lead for your sales team if you have them, and you better send them following the person who left. Because you can follow someone the same way you're worried about somebody coming into your account. You want to be the guy who's coming into the other account. So those are, we used to call those red flag moments, but new leadership is a huge red flag moment, and it should set off all kinds of bells and whistles and actions. I just imagine the little mousetrap, the wheel, you pluck the ball and it goes down and trips all the little gadgets and things along the way. But that's what it looked like in our MSP when somebody like that left. And we actually picked up 3 small K-12 environments, education environments, because one technology coordinator worked for 3 different schools and brought us to all 3 of them. So I could literally put my finger on $12,000 a month that came from following this lady around where she went from job to job.
Yeah. You're paying her basically to just jump ship after a couple of years.
I would have paid her to leave another job. It was the best money I ever made.
On the sales side of things, Alex, on top of that, I mean, this goes even further, right? Because when someone comes into a new leadership role in an organization, what's the first thing they're doing other than learning the ropes? They're trying to find out everything. Yeah, they're looking for the problems, and guaranteed, when the computer's not working one day, someone's just going to embellish the truth a little bit and tell them that the computers never work and there's all sorts of problems here, right? It get also a chance to draw the line under things and reactivate that customer if there's someone who's not been spending and they've been ignoring things. So that in itself, again, account management, customer success, there's so many things. And like you said about leaving the organization, if you've looked after the people, remember, people don't buy from companies, people buy from people. That's why when they move on somewhere else, they're going to want to bring you with them. So if you look after them, of course they're going to want to work with you, especially if the place they go, they don't like the people that are there looking after them.
And if you've been that strategic partner with them, call it a VCIO or your customer success manager, you then have the perfect opportunity to help the new leadership define maybe some problems that you have been seeing, right? So if you suddenly get that strategic conversation with new leadership and show your value right at the beginning with them, it's much harder for them to want to say, like, clearly IT is a problem. Nope, IT is bringing, the strategy to me, which just tightens up a future relationship with them.
Yeah, they're like, great, I can deal with something else now because these guys have already taken care of all this. And, I like them. And they keep coming back all the time wanting to talk to me, making sure I'm okay. So, and that's another thing, talking about QBRs, if a customer knows that they're going to see you at some point in the future, a bit like, when you're fixing technical problems for a customer and you turn up to fix one thing and they say, by the way, whilst you're here, can you fix this, this, and this? But they know you're coming. So they don't raise tickets because they know you're going to turn up on Friday, right? So they store all these things up. From an account management perspective, they do the same. If they know, well, I'm not going to let these things wind me up so much. I'm going to wait until this QBR and then I'm going to tell them. And the same thing happens. You just don't know about it. That's kind of like the equivalent of not giving customers feedback on CSAT. All these things don't tell you.
And I think regular communication is so important to fixing some of those things. We do it. You're talking about at CSAT. You go ask your customers for CSAT, and I think you were talking about in the green room, or maybe once we first started. But asking your customers for that feedback. And one of the things we always teach our customers when they're giving QBRs is reach out early, way ahead of the QBR, 2-3 weeks. Mr. Customer, we're going to be having this meeting. Here's a list of the things I want to talk about. Please add to it the things you want to talk about, so that we can make sure we come prepared to address them. Am I planning to put their bitch list on my QBR list? No. I'm going to address it right away. The minute they send it back to me, I'm going to go, ring, ring, Mr. Customer, your satisfaction is way too important to me for these customer satisfaction issues to wait till our strategic meeting in 2 weeks. Can we hammer those out right now? If I need to go get in a tech space, if I need to solve a problem for you, if there's something else I will grease the wheels right now. We'll move hell on earth to make it happen. And that's the way number one, you clear the plate for that strategic meeting so it can stay strategic, but you also show that customer that you care about them enough to deal with that issue right then and there. And that only happens in organizations where customer success and customer experience is a core value and is part of the DNA, if you will.
So, Mark, I want to ask you really quickly. Brian's been patient, and he asked a question a little while ago. Going back to kind of this point that you were mentioning, Mark, about kind of seeing a problem. He's wondering, were you actually losing clients before you hired the account manager, or was this just you noticing a drop in satisfaction?
It was So it was two things. We weren't losing clients, thankfully. I think we were on the cusp of losing clients. When you're having the same conversation with a customer every day, or you're having it, every week, you're thinking, man, I just had that call. This feels like a moment ago I had that call with that guy, and it's happened again, and it's happened again. You're starting to realize, and you look at your team and the capacity. There's a few KPIs that you're going to look at there that are going to tell you that. If you look at your team, you're thinking, well, they can't go any faster, they can't do anymore, but I don't have the revenue to hire another engineer to address the problem. What's the problem? It's fundamentally a sales problem, right? Everything comes to a position where you're kind of getting backed into a corner. You're getting trapped. You're thinking, I'll have to do something. For us, it was a realization that new sales, the person that we had in new sales role, it wasn't generating enough to support resolution of that problem. Putting someone into an account management role that could activate those sales much faster from an existing client base was clearly the solution to the problem. As for customer satisfaction, yeah, we did have a dip in customer satisfaction, but I think, as you told me, Jonathan, before, it wasn't much of a dip. I had to zoom right in to see it, but it was there.
All things are relative, all things are relative. Well, Tom, you mentioned, so there's some discussion going on in the chat about referral programs. And so kind of translating satisfaction to referrals. And of course, we touched on that before, and Alex brought up, hey, don't end any QBR meeting without asking the question. But yeah, you want to talk a little bit more about what you've added in the chat here about how you set things up with your account manager in referrals?
Yeah, well, the account manager, usually they were talking to the office managers at our clients. They had a good relationship with them, and they could promote our referral program. And our referral program was targeted to office managers at clients, and we paid either $1,000 or $1,500 cash if a deal was closed and the new client had been on board for 2 months. So this was pretty popular, and we would have, and because the account manager was in close contact with these people on, certain problems going on, projects upcoming, selling them hardware, they were able to have that relationship and keep that in front of them continually. And it ended up being a real source and unforeseen of a lot of net new business that came in. And it would often come in directly and not through our salesperson, because they were out hunting, and then I would close those deals, which was much more profitable to the company. But it was kind of a lot of legwork done. And that was something that I always kind of focused on. Who are the key people at a client that could really send us the most business? And that account manager is going to be in contact with them. And I also want to just start typing in here, always think about it in terms of this. You can hire an account manager for a lot less than a salesperson, and the ramp time is a lot shorter. You can have that account manager do a lot of sales type things. That's what I had mine do. And that can you can parlay that into a lot of success, and then maybe making that the ability later on to use that money to bring on a salesperson. So you don't really have to do it in the order of salesperson then account manager. You could install account manager first and get the value out of that, and use later on to bring on the other resources to grow.
I think it's the definition of, you've said it several times now, Tom, hunting, right? But the opposite being an account manager's farming, right? Hunting and farming. And if you're not farming that, and all the things that go into farming, right? Looking after the crop, growing it, making sure it's all right. If you're just constantly out there planting, hunting all the time, there's so much more to be farmed. Right. Like you say, a bigger MSP needs to be doing both.
Well, and to the point that you were making earlier, Mark, you said, that customer success person has to be looking out for not necessarily what the customer wants, but what's in their best interest. So often what's in their best interest is just convincing them that our best practices work, and adopting a few more of our products and services makes them more secure, more stable, more reliable. And so MFA, no customers ever come to you and said, I want more six-digit codes to punch in when I log into my stuff. Nobody's ever said that. But if you give it to them, you'll have fewer tickets around breached accounts. You'll have, better security. Life just gets better. Things just smooth out. And so, a lot of that account management job is building enough relationship that you can say, buy more of my stuff and you'll be happier. Yeah, and that's a thing.
It's true. Yeah.
One thing I like to point out too was, like, for example, when we added VoIP services, I didn't have our full-time hunter, our salespeople push that out. I had our account manager do it. They already had the relationship. They already knew what the client's needs were. And we pushed VoIP out that way. And I know we have people on this call that find that of great interest.
Tech Bar hosts. Tech Bar is happening tonight, guys. Ray and Sean are from OIT VoIP, and they host Tech Bar, which is going to be, I believe, at 6:30. I'll have to double check. I can drop a link in the doc. I do want to call. So we got about 10 minutes left. If anyone's got questions, now's the time to ask. But I did want to call attention again back to the doc before we wrap up here and go for closing thoughts. Just because there's a lot of resources here that are worth checking out. Marnie suggested a bunch of these. There's some great books. There's stuff, anyone who's interested in learning more about NPS or CSAT, we got blog posts on that. And then I think I did mention we did a webinar about a year ago with Corey Brown from SimpleSat. And so I've included a link to the video there and also slides. We've got a whole series on QBRs from these guys at LifeCycle that you can check out. And then also links to those tools. Going back to CSAT while we wait for other people to ask questions here at the end. I love when we pulled it up here and we had the example of Mark's website, and boom, like this is something that I know Smileback advocates for and offers as a feature, able to have a live CSAT reading right on your site. And we had the comment of, wow, that's bold. But when you have a score like this, huge selling point, right? I mean, this comes back to a topic that I talk about all the time with our partners is websites, and we do website reviews and things like that. And social proof is such a huge part of it. What a cool sales tool that you've been able to add this. But anything else you want to talk about the kind of behind the scenes there, Mark, in terms of collecting scores, actually getting to people to respond to surveys, getting the most out of CSAT or other feedback?
Yeah, I think first of all, it's really important there's no point in having a good score if you've got a low response rate, right? Don't fall into that trap, because you've got to get that response rate up. I would rather have a CSAT score of 50 with a response rate of 100% than the other way around, right? Because it doesn't tell you what you need to know, and it's not going to help you. And the truth matters when it comes to customer satisfaction, right? You can't hide from it. Even if you think you can ignore it, it's still there, right? So you got to address it. So a few things that we've done, having our engineers ask out directly, that helps, right? And talking about back to the beginning of the call about culture and about how people begin. We've all seen it at our MSP, right? When they phone up, they want a certain person because they have an affinity to an individual. People do start to develop a relationship between the client and your engineers. And if they know that it matters to your engineer and they ask for the feedback, then they're likely to get it. Now, if they don't get it and they have negative feedback or neutral feedback, or they don't give feedback at all, if you have your account manager reach out. So these are some of the value add things that if you don't think you've got enough work for an account manager right now to be doing, this is the extra things that can be doing. Having them reach out to say, look, we've noticed that your engagement on our CSAT is really low. That really helps us. It helps us measure that you're happy. Ask them to have their employees do it, or ask the employees directly. That's another thing that you can do. And if all else fails, you can just incentivize them. We run competitions as well. We haven't done it for the last few months because of COVID, but we run competitions and give away prizes. So and they've got to be something people would want, right? I mean, it has to be something exciting enough. Probably $50 isn't enough to get someone real excited, but I think it's something that's worthwhile. And if you want to make the prize bigger and stretch the period out that you're going to give the prize out over, right? So make a bigger prize in 3 months, and then people will want to get involved in that. Anything you can do. And what starts to happen is it's a bit of a flywheel. So as people start to ask for it, if they don't ask for it, they're getting asked to ask for it. When they do provide the feedback and it's negative or it's neutral, and then they see that you respond to it, they start to learn this is a mechanism by where we can get our voice heard. So if you've got an unhappy customer, we're going to tell you.
Yeah, I mean, it's so much comes from so much trouble comes out of people just not feeling heard, right? Marnie, I'm going to put the spotlight back on you for a second because you've been active in the chat, and there's a great discussion feeding out of this. So, okay, yes, there's CSAT scores. That's just one mechanism, right? But if, let's say, Derek mentions, okay, smaller MSPs looking to just get kind of started, start collecting feedback, doing more with that. You're bringing out the idea of a customer health score. And this goes into red flags, like Alex is mentioning too. Like maybe there's the informal things that you start to recognize of like changing leadership. There's probably more so many red flags you probably get to notice as an owner. But customer health score, this is a way of kind of inching towards formalizing a little bit, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So we see a lot of some MSPs use sort of how deep their clients are utilizing their stack would be part of their health score. Because as Alex will say, the reason you should use my preferred process would be because it makes you stable, reliable, and secure, right? So a client is much more likely to be unhealthy and much more at risk for churn if they're not using all of your products. So not only is it an upsell opportunity, it's also a potential for churn. So you're really trying to define those things that help you not just define what might be possible churn, but if you define a really healthy client for you, you know what to market toward, right? So if you suddenly know my ideal client does all of these things, they believe in the importance of managed services, right? They believe in the importance of a regular business review and conversations around strategy with their business pain points aligned to technology. You're identifying your ideal client, which then lets you identify good prospects as well. So your customer health doesn't just help for building up your current client base. It also helps you identify ways to go after new client base. So the farming actually helps the hunting as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great point. Making yourself sticky, obviously, but then turn around and getting more clarity around your ideal client and who to go after. Tom, we're coming up on a few minutes here. Oh, Marnie, sorry, did you want to say one more thing?
Well, I was just going to say it very much aligns with when you first start this, it's going to be exactly what Mark did. I had a feeling, right? Like something didn't feel right. He could probably identify the 3 people that they've had those weekly conversations with and knew something was off. And I bet at this point, he can clearly define when that starts to happen a lot faster, but it will absolutely start with an undefined process. Just like any process maturity model, it will start with, I had a hunch, and that's okay. You can start with a spreadsheet and color everybody red, yellow, green, right? And then move from there to say like, what 3 numbers do I think is making that move?
Yeah,
that's great. And I did want to continue on that thread for just a second. I know we're running up on time here, but wanted to call it really quickly. Sandra, so good to see you here, Sandra. Thanks for joining. She has this comment backing up what Mark was saying too. When she sees they get neutral or negative reviews, they don't wait. They call the client right away, and they use this as an opportunity to touch base and set things right, and then ask them to change the score. But it's doing what you were talking about, Mark. It's reaffirming that, hey, it's a big challenge with these scores, right? Like, are they actually going to look at this feedback? Are they actually going to do anything with it? Once you prove that you are, they're going to be much more likely to use it going forward.
Yeah, it's a feedback loop, right? And if our account manager had a pound or $1 for every time he phoned the customer and they said, "Oh, I didn't mean to click that," red face, he'd be a happier man. So it's sometimes, when you're talking about getting from 95 to 100%, those are the things that matter, because one red face, one F-bomb will totally mess it up.
Yeah, absolutely. And Tom, do you want to send us home with a couple of closing thoughts here, and mainly bring it back to, again, this, I love this line of, okay, we're talking about some interesting things here. We've got Mark, who's been kind enough to come in and share a little bit about how they've gotten to where they've gotten. Any more advice for people who are kind of on the more of the starting off phase of things?
Yeah, well, as you've probably seen what I've said, I treated the account management role as more of kind of a salesperson who then had some good people skills as well, because I wanted to get the value out of them, and I incentivized them with commission on top of their pay. It was a good portion of what they made. Also want to point out, there's a lot of discussion about surveys and getting those filled out. That's a problem. People look at them and it's just another survey. Like, what am I going to do with this? Well, what I would do with surveys is I incorporate also into my QBR to a point where I would just, for people we couldn't get to fill them out, we had a discussion with them, and usually the account manager or during a QBR, take them through it and discuss the answers and actually get the answers from them, because I wanted the data no matter what. And that was important to me. And maybe it wasn't quite always as good because they weren't filling it on their own, but it was better to have that data than not have it.
Alex, how about you? Let's go to you, sir.
Well, I want to pick up right where Tom left off, because if they don't give you the data, you can't improve. And the important thing is to communicate with your customer that this is a continuous improvement process inside your business. And if they don't tell you where you dropped the ball, you don't know where to pick up the ball. So it's important to just make sure your customer knows we're not looking to fire somebody because you put a red frowny face on a ticket. That's not what's going to happen. Don't shy away from giving us that feedback, because we can't fix it if we don't know it happened. It's a blind spot to us. And that just means it's going to happen again and again and again until you get so fed up that you come yell at me about it. So it's much easier if you just click the little red frowny face and give us the opportunity to react to it.
And how about you, Mark?
Yeah, well, you don't know what you don't know, right? If you're not measuring your customer satisfaction, how do you not know that it's 100%? So I'll go leave it at that. You can't, you can't address it. You can't action it if you don't measure it. Like, just echoing what Alex and Tom said, but it might be a lot better than you think.
Well, there you go. I mean, and then it becomes a sales tool. It's something that can be really powerful. So I do want to thank everybody. Thank you guys. We're right at the top of the hour here. Thanks everybody who's on the line here. All of our panelists. Thank you, Alex and Marty from LifeCycle. And thank you, Mark from M3 Networks, for sharing your story. Thank you, Tom, as always. And thanks everybody in the audience. Before we wrap up, I want to do a last little plug here. So we got our next live chat coming up in 2 weeks' time. And we're going to have Ray and Sean. You may have seen them in the chat. They're from OIT VoIP. They're going to be coming on. and they're going to be talking about virtual selling. And what's going to be cool is we can see Ray showing off his setup. If you haven't seen Ray do a webinar or on the tech bar, his setup is insane. He's going to walk us through what it's actually made of. So he's going to show off his camera, microphone, lighting, all that stuff. We're also going to have Heather Harless from Bitdefender, who also has like the craziest monitor I've ever seen. So anyway, we're going to show off those things. We're going to be giving away a prize too. We're going to be giving away a cool camera, webcam, microphone, lighting. So a little extra incentive to check out that one. And then, yes, the medicine that goes with the sugar is we're going to be sharing some sales tips as well for how to basically tackle sales right now when a lot of things are virtual. But yeah, thank you everybody once again, and yeah, we'll see you next time. Thanks everybody.
Thanks everyone. Bye.
Take care.